George Harrison, the Quiet Beatle, met model Pattie Boyd in 1964 on the set of the Beatles' first film, A Hard Day's Night. Pattie was cast as a schoolgirl extra in a brief scene, and it was there that she met George. Shy but instantly smitten, asked her out for dinner. At first, she politely declined because she had a boyfriend, but soon broke things off and accepted George's invitation. Their relationship blossomed quickly. George, only 21 at the time, was a rising global superstar, and Pattie was a rising star in the London modeling scene. Their love story quickly unfolded in the spotlight of Beatlemania, making them one of the most famous couples of the 1960s. In January 1966, George and Pattie married in a quiet ceremony in Surrey. Paul McCartney served as best man. Their early married life seemed like a dream, surrounded by music, fame, and creativity. Pattie inspired many of George's songs, most famously Something, which became one of the Beatles' biggest hits and was praised by even Frank Sinatra as one of the greatest love songs ever written. But behind the glamorous image, cracks were starting to form. George's deepening interest in Indian spirituality and meditation gradually pulled him inward, creating emotional distance in their marriage. Pattie supported his spiritual journey, even joining him on a trip to India, but over time, George's spiritual devotion and his growing fame sometimes left her feeling isolated. Into their lives stepped Eric Clapton, one of George's closest friends. Clapton and Harrison shared a deep love for music and often played guitar together, even collaborating on the Beatles' While My Guitar Gently Weeps. But Clapton became enchanted by more than just George's guitar skills. He fell hopelessly in love with Pattie Boyd. Pattie, still married to George, initially didn't know the depth of Eric's feelings. But in 1970, Eric wrote one of his most famous songs, Layla, pouring all of his heartbreak and longing into the lyrics. The song, inspired by a Persian love story of unrequited passion, was Eric's way of expressing his feelings for Pattie while she was still married to his friend. Eric confessed his love to Pattie directly, but she stayed loyal to George, at least for the time being. However, by the early 1970s, George and Pattie's marriage was unraveling. George was often emotionally distant and had affairs with other women, including reportedly with Ringo Starr's wife, Maureen. Pattie, feeling lonely and disconnected, eventually gave in to her feelings for Eric. George and Pattie separated in 1974, and their divorce was finalized in 1977. Not long after, Pattie and Eric Clapton married in 1979, in a lavish wedding attended by many celebrities, including George himself. Despite the personal drama, George and Eric remained friends. Their bond through music seemed to outweigh their rivalry in love. George famously joked about the situation, calling it a bit of a romantic triangle, but never letting it destroy their friendship. Pattie later described this chapter of her life as both thrilling and painful. She had been the muse of two of rock star's greatest musicians and inspired some of the most iconic love songs in history. From Something by George to Layla and Wonderful Tonight by Eric, her influence on their songwriting was undeniable. Yet, her personal happiness was more complicated. Her marriage to Eric Clapton also faced its struggles. Eric battled with alcohol and drug addiction for years, and their relationship became strained. Pattie eventually divorced Eric in 1989, choosing to step away from the chaos of rock star relationships and build a more peaceful life. Looking back, Pattie Boyd's story is more than just a love triangle. It reflects the intense passions and pressures surrounding some of the biggest musical legends of the 20th century. George Harrison, known as the quiet and spiritual Beatle, found himself in a marriage he couldn't fully protect from the temptations and distractions of fame. Eric Clapton, driven by his obsession, poured his emotions into music that would define his career. Pattie, caught in the middle, became the face of inspiration but also heartbreak. Despite the drama, George and Eric's friendship endured. In later years, they performed together again, showing a level of forgiveness and maturity that few expected. They seemed to understand that their shared love for music, and maybe even their shared love for Pattie, was bigger than rivalry. Pattie, in her own right, later became a respected photographer, capturing candid moments of famous friends and sharing her side of the story in her memoir, Wonderful Tonight. In telling her story, she offered a rare glimpse into the emotional lives of rock legends, showing that behind the fame were people struggling with love, loyalty, and identity. The story of George Harrison, Pattie Boyd, and Eric Clapton is often remembered for its romantic twists, but also a story of creativity. Some of the most beautiful, enduring songs of the 20th century were born out of this tangled love story. Without this emotional conflict, we may not have had Something, a Beatles classic full of longing and devotion, or Layla, one of rock's most powerful cries of love. Even Eric's ballad Wonderful Tonight reflects a quieter moment of affection inspired by Pattie's presence in his life. But beyond the music and headlines, their story shows how love and friendship can collide in unexpected ways. George and Eric's ability to forgive and continue as friends is rare in the world of fame and ego. And Pattie's decision to finally walk away from both relationships shows her desire to find peace outside of the spotlight. Today, this story remains one of the most fascinating chapters in rock history. It reminds us that even the most talented, celebrated people face heartbreak, jealousy, and choices that change their lives forever. George Harrison passed away in 2001, leaving behind a legacy of spiritual music and deep reflection. Eric Clapton continues to perform, often speaking openly about his struggles and regrets. Pattie Boyd has built a life beyond the headlines, sharing her story through photography and writing. In the end, the love triangle between George Harrison, Pattie Boyd, and Eric Clapton is more than a tabloid drama. It's a human story about love's ability to inspire great art, and its power to complicate even the closest friendships. It's a reminder that behind every song, there is a story, and behind every legend, there is a life filled of joy, pain, and unforgettable moments. Like, comment, and subscribe for daily history and culture content.